So in this video we're going to talk about how to find the volume of a cylinder. We'll also go through how to find the volume of a cylinder in terms of pi, and also look at more exam style questions, as well as looking at questions that involve reverse problems where you are given the volume and required to find either the radius, the diameter or the height of the cylinder. So a cylinder can be called or classed as a circular prism, as its cross-sectional area is consistent throughout its length. In other words, it's just a pile of the same shape. So in a cylinder, obviously that same shape is the circle, so a cylinder is a pile of the same size circle. So to find its volume, we can just use the generic formula of that the volume equals the cross-sectional area times its length. So therefore, to work out the cylinder's volume, we must first work out the area of the circle and then multiply this by either its length or its height, depending on whether the cylinder is standing up or whether it's lying across. So as you can see from the diagram, that it's basically the labelling of how we use the formula. So the formula there is that the volume of the cylinder is the area of the circle times the length or the height. Now, generally speaking, if you saw this in a revision guide or on a website, it might either just say the length or it might say the height. But either way, you're not going to use both the length or the height, simply because it all depends on whether, as I've said before, whether the cylinder is standing up or whether it's lying across. So for example, on this diagram, you can see that the circle is on the base, on the actual surface, so therefore we're looking at the height, whereas if the cylinder was across, then this would be classed as the length. Now, if I just get rid of that diagram there, so it's worth making a note, or if you're making a revision cards, of that the general formula along with the diagram, because it's always useful to have a diagram when you're using a formula so you know where bits are called, particularly when it comes to labelling, is just that. Now again, as a reminder, the area of a circle is pi times the radius squared, and then you multiply that by the length or the height. As I said, you're only going to use either the length or the height when working this out. Now, if we then move across some important notes, now I definitely would urge you to make notes of these, so, and it's definitely worth highlighting. Let's use blue, so let's just put a little bubble around these while I go through these. So the important notes are things like, now obviously these are things that should be in your head before you are working through a volume of a cylinder question. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you find the radius of the circle. Now in some cases you might find that the diameter is given. So if the diameter is given, all you need to do is divide this number by 2, and therefore, hey presto, you've got the radius. Also make sure, and again number 2 is really important, as all of these points are important, is make sure that the units for the radius and the height or the length is the same. So if you've got a mixture of units, make sure that you convert them to either centimetres or millimetres or metres or kilometres or whatever length units that you're using. And once you've found the volume, obviously don't forget the units of your answer. So it's either going to be, obviously it's going to, as its volume, it's going to be in cube units. So it's either going to be millimetre cubes if your lengths are given in millimetres, centimetre cubed if your lengths are given in centimetres, metre cubes if your length measurements are in metres. And finally, if you're asked to leave your answer in terms of pi, all you need to do there is calculate what r squared is. Now I don't know why, let's just quickly change that and we'll pretend that's never there. There we go. So all you need to do is simply calculate what r squared is, multiply that by the length, and once you've worked out those two things there, the next thing you then need to do is just simply stick a pi at the end of your answer. So the only thing you need to work out is what r squared times l or times h is, and then once you've got your answer, stick pi at the end. Now your answer for r squared times length might be a fraction, and if it is, again, same thing applies, just stick the pi symbol at the end. And also remembering rule 3 is don't forget the units. Now again, if any of those steps those important notes don't make any sense to you, when we go through some examples, I'll recall these important notes of things to look out for, so you're not losing any silly mistakes when it comes to exams. So let's get straight into this. So in this first particular question, which I've not numbered, so let's just quickly number this question 1. So here we're asked to find the volume of the following cylinders. Now the first thing we want to check is, are the units the same for the length and what's given here. So yes, we'll be given two sets of lengths and they're both in centimetres, so that's the first one ticked. So the next thing I want to do is make sure I've been given the radius. Now in this I have been given the radius, so the radius is 5 centimetres and the height in this case is 14 centimetres. So to work out the area of the circle, so the area of the circle is going to be pi times the radius squared. So in this case it's going to be pi times 5 squared, which is 25 pi. And this is leaving your answer in terms of pi because the only thing I've worked out is the 5 squared. I've stuck pi and left it as it is. Now if you've got one of the new Casio calculators, if you typed in pi times 5 squared and press equal, it always try and give you the exact value, which in this case is 25 pi. And if you press the SD button, then that would simply give you the decimal value. Now all I've worked out there, now if I actually press this equals on 25 pi, what that gives me is an answer of 78.53981634. Now the next thing I've not finished because that's just the area of the circle, so the volume is equal to the area of the circle times its height. So in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply 78.539811634. Now if I've left that on my calculator, all I then need to do is just times that by 14. So if I times that by 14, I get 350 pi, which is also equal as a decimal as 199557.557429. Now what I'm going to do is, and the units for that are going to be centimetre cubed. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to round that up, so which is going to be rounded up to 1099.6 centimetre cubed, and that's given to 1 decimal place. So again, always look out for rounding. There's nothing telling me to round in this particular question, but like I said, it's just a case of that. Now if you're not too sure about rounding, there is a video that I've made on rounding, whether it's to decimal places or sig fig, it's entirely up to you. So let's have a look at our next question, so question number 2. So again, the first thing we want to check is, are our two lengths given in the same unit? So yes, because we've got 8 metres and we've got 24 metres. Now in this particular case, I've been given the diameter, so the diameter is equal to 8 metres, but what I need is I need to know the radius. So to work out the radius, all I need to do is divide the diameter by 2, which gives me 4 metres, and that is what I'm going to be using to work out the volume. So the volume is going to be equal to pi times the radius squared, and I'm going to multiply that by the height of this cylinder. So as you can see, in theory, this is what tells me what the area of the circle is, but if I all want to do it in one line, then that is absolutely fine. You're not going to lose any marks in a test, and you might find it easier, but just make sure that you do recognise that this bit here is the area of a circle. So again, if I type that into my calculator, which if I've loaded up, let's have a look if I have, which I haven't. So let's just quickly load that up. So here we go. So I'm going to enter this on my calculator. So I'm going to do shift pi times 4 squared times, and I'm just going to make sure that's scrolled across, yeah, times 24, and I press equals. As you can see on this calculator, it's actually giving me the correct or the accurate answer of 484 pi, and that's giving me my answer in terms of pi. So I've got 384 pi, and this is your answer in terms of pi. And if I press the SD button on my calculator, then and that will give me an answer of 1206.371579, and that's in metre cubed. And again, if I'm going to round this up, which really I should do, let's round up to 1 decimal place. So it gives me 1206.4 to 1 decimal place. So again, it's always important that you remember rounding. And again, this bracket here, if you want to do it all in one line, that's absolutely fine, because all you're doing is following the rule of that. So it's pi times the radius squared times the length. And again, the key difference with this particular question is I was given the diameter. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you work out the radius, and then make sure that your units for both the height or the length and the radius are the same units. So let's have a look at our next question. So in this particular case, you could see that the cylinder has been sort of rotated onto its side. So rather than looking at the height, we're now looking at the length, but again, it doesn't really make a difference to this. Now again, what you want to do is make sure that you're given the same units. So again, both are in centimetres, so I don't need to do any converting. So the next thing I then need to do is then plug this, decide, have I been given the radius? Well, in this case, I have. So that's great. So R equals 60. So all I need to then do is go straight into working out the volume. So again, I'm going to do pi times the radius squared, which is 60 squared, and I'm going to multiply that by the length, which is 200. Now in this case, you might expect your answer to be quite a big number, simply because you're going to be multiplying 60 squared by 200. So again, if I plug that straight into my calculator, which again, let me just show you how we would do that. So again, I'm going to do pi times 60 squared, and then multiply that by 200, and I get an answer of, now because the number is rather big, it's given to me as a sort of decimal answer straight away. So this would be a type of a question where you're not asked to work out, or not asked to give you the answer in terms of pi, but if you were, I'll show you what we need to do. So let's just copy down that answer. So it was 2261946.711 centimetre cubed, which again, if we round this up, will be 2261946.7 centimetre cubed to 1 decimal place. Now, if we wanted to give this question in terms of pi, so in terms of pi, then what I would do is I would do 60 squared times 200 times pi. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this pi by itself, and I'm just going to work out what those two things there are. So I'm going to type in 60 squared times 200 on my calculator, or whatever method you're doing, which gives me 72000, so 720,000 pi, and that will be in centimetre cubed. So there is your answer in terms of pi. But like I said, you only really need to give your answer in terms of pi if they ask for it, which in this case they didn't, so we don't need to worry about it. So with question 4, so again here, first thing we want to do is check, are our two units the same, which in this case they are. So here again, I've been given the diameter, so I'm going to say that if the diameter is 30, then the radius is 15. So again, because you always need the radius to work out the volume. So to work out the volume, it's going to be pi times the radius squared times 1.2. And again, all I'm going to do is plug that straight into my calculator. So pi times 15 squared times 1.2. And if I type that into my calculator, 15 squared times 1.2, I get an answer of 270 pi, which in decimal form is 848.2300165, which rounded up is 848.2 meters cubed to 1 decimal place. So again, rounding is optional, but again, obviously because it's not mentioned here, but if you are, then it's always to make sure that you have done that correctly. So let's have a look at the next example. So here, find the volume of the cylinder, leaving your answer in terms of pi. So again, first thing we want to do is make sure that are the units the same. or yes they are, so I don't need to do any converting there. So the next thing we then need to do is use the formula. Now because they want to work the answer in terms of pi, all I'm going to do is I'm going to do pi times the radius squared times 10. Now all I'm going to do is just do this bit here. So I'm just going to type in 5 squared times 10, which equals 250, which in other words is 25 times 10, which is 250. And I've got the pi at the end. So I've not, again, this could easily be a non-calculator question, and you tend to find that questions where it asks you to in terms of pi may easily appear on a non-calculator paper, so you'd expect the numbers to be nice and easy to work with. So all I'm going to do here is join these two things together. So the volume is going to be 250 pi, and the units are going to be centimetre cubed, and there is your final answer. So moved on to the next example. Now this is more of a complex worded question. So here it says that the volume of the cylinder is melted to make a cube. Find the length of the cube. Now in this particular question, so let me just move slightly up so we can see what we need to do. Now this question will be worth quite a lot of marks. So the first thing we need to do is work out the volume of the cylinder. So work out the volume of the cylinder. Now that's going to equal, so this equals the volume of the cube, and then once we've done that, what we then need to do is to cube root, which looks like that, to find the length of the cube. So they're the three steps that we need to work out first. So again, going back to what we know, so let's get a different colour pen, let's go for blue. So the first thing we want to do is work out the volume of the cylinder. So again, the first thing we need to do is make sure are the units the same, or yes, because we're working in centimetres. Now the next thing we then need to do is make sure we're given the radius. Now in this particular question we're given the diameter, so if the diameter is 8 centimetres, then the radius is going to be 4 centimetres. So the volume of the cylinder, so V equals pi times the radius squared, which is 4 squared, times the length, which is 40, and I'm going to type that straight into my calculator. So I've got pi times 4 squared times 40, which gives me 640 pi. And if I press SD on my calculator, I get 2010.619298. Now the second step, now this is what and that's centimetre cubed. So this is the volume of the cube. So what I then need to do is to work out the volume of this length of the cube. Now because the cube, all the dimensions are going to be the same, so if the length is, the width is x, the depth is going to be x, and the height is going to be x. So all I need to then do is cube root the answer. In other words, this number here. Now again, to access the cube root on your calculator, what you need to do is look out for where it's got little 3 and the square root. So what I need to do on this calculator is press shift, or if I just clear that first by pressing that button, so I press shift and then press the cube root button, and then I'm going to enter 2010.619298. Now rather than entering that long number, what I could have easily done is just entered 640 pi. And if I press equals, so it tells me that the length of the cube is going to be 12.62. So again, all I need to do then is just simply decide how I'm going to write this answer up. So therefore, it's the cube root of 640 pi, or you could do the cube root of 210.619 blah blah blah, and so x equals 12.62147028, or 12.6 to 1 centimetres to 1 decimal place. Now again, remembering the units, we're not looking at area, we're not looking at volume, we're looking at length, so it's single length units, and that's why it's just centimetres. Now the next type of complex question is what we could get is what we call a reverse question. So this is where you're given the volume and you need to work out what either the radius is or what the height is. In this question, we're asked to work out the height. So here we're given the volume and we know that the radius is 10. Now obviously if you've not been given a diagram, then it's always worth drawing a diagram of a cylinder and labelling those 2 points. So all I need to know is that the volume is equal to 400 metre cubed. Now for this, if I look at the formula of the volume of a cylinder, it's V equals pi times the radius squared times h. Now if I substitute what I know, well, let me just get rid of the V and put it on the other side. So let's just write equals the volume. So I've got pi times the radius, which I know, which is 10. So I've got 10 squared, times x, because I don't know what the height is, because the height is x, times the volume, which I do know, which is 400. So all I've done there is substitute the numbers in. Now if I then work out what this is, which is going to be 100 pi, and that times x equals 400. Now I want to work out what x is, so I want to get rid of this 100 pi. Now you ask yourself, what is 100 pi doing to the x? Well, it's multiplying, so to get rid of it, what I need to do is divide by 100 pi. So if I then do x equals 400 divided by 100 pi, and I type that into my calculator, I get 400 divided by 100 pi, and that gives me an answer of 1.2732395545. In other words, if I round that number up, I get 1.3 metres to 1 decimal place. And it's always, if you're rounding, always state what your rounding is, or again, if you want to play it safe, you can just simply copy whatever's on your calculator. So when it comes to reverse questions, all you'd therefore do is multiply, well, first square the radius, multiply that by the length, and then divide it by the volume. And then you'll be away to go. So obviously this differs from finding the radius, because what I then need to do is rearrange it in square root. But again, like I said, it's just a case of, as long as you use this formula for reverse questions, it then becomes an algebraic question of solving an equation involving powers or just taking numbers to the other side. But I certainly would set your work out correctly and then work backwards from there. So if you have a look at another reverse problem, so again here, this is where we're given the volume and we want to work out either its length or its radius. So unlike example 7, here what we're asked to find is the radius of the circle. Now the format is exactly the same. So in this we know that the volume is 540 centimetre cubed. So again, if I make a note of the volumes, the formula, so the formula is pi times r squared times h. So in this, I know that the volume is 540, and I know that pi is just a number, times the radius squared, which in this case is x, times the height, which is 10. Now, what I'm going to do now is just simply combine the pi and the 10 together, so I get 10 pi times x squared. Now, pi is just a number, it's just 3.14157. So I want to try and get x by itself, so I want to get rid of this 10 pi. So you think to yourself, what is 10 pi doing? Well, it's multiplying, so the opposite would be to divide. So if I do 540 divided by 10 pi, that gives me what x squared is. Now the question is asking me to find out what the radius is, not what x squared is. So for this, all I then need to do is know that x is going to equal the square root of 540 divided by 10 pi, and if I type that into my calculator, so pi, and then use my fraction button, if you've got it on your calculator. So it's 540 divided by 10 pi, and that equals, so x equals 459299794. In other words, rounded up gives me 4.1 centimetre to 1 decimal place. And again, if you're not sure about how to enter that on your calculator, let me just reset it. So all we're going to do here is press our fraction button if you've got one. We're actually going to press our square root button first, then press our fraction. I'm just going to enter 540, scroll down, and then enter 10 pi, shift pi on my calculator, press equals, and you can see it gives me the exact number. And again, all I've done there is just rounded up to 1 decimal place, giving me the answer of 4.1, and then not forgetting the units, which is measured in centimetres.